Okay, we are on lesson 4 of imperialism, and this will be our last day to take notes. Please remember that you can take notes on a piece of paper. You can print out the fill-in-the-blank notes and write in the answers, and then you can type them in onto your electronic copy, or you can take a picture of those notes, but they must be saved in your Google Drive in the U.S. History folder and inside of the Imperialism folder. It's very important that you keep these notes because you'll need them to study for your test. All right. So we talked about America winning the Spanish-American War and all of the new territory that we gained. A lot of that territory was in the Caribbean Ocean. And so politicians began to see it kind of as our own little private American lake. Okay. Back in the late 1700s, the early 1800s, the Monroe Doctrine, when James Monroe was president, he established a doctrine that said no European colonies will be allowed in the Western Hemisphere. We wanted America to be able to have control of our territory. Remember when we talked about manifest destiny, from sea to shining sea, we said South America has its own territories, but we don't want any European influence in the Western Hemisphere. Well, the Roosevelt corollary, a corollary is like an area. Sometimes we might call it it comes from the word corridor, which means like a hall or maybe a wing of a building. Well, the Roosevelt corollary was an area in the Caribbean Ocean, and it extended Monroe Doctrine, and it said the United States has a right to intervene in Latin America. Now, we talked about President Roosevelt a couple days ago before he was president, when he was a soldier and he was a volunteer, and he and his men charged up San Juan Hill in the Spanish-American War. That made him very popular. Very soon after that, he was asked to be vice president. And not long into President McKinley's second term, President McKinley was assassinated. And now Teddy Roosevelt became president. He was the youngest president to have served at that time. And he was very outspoken. If you remember from our last unit, we talked about the Bull Moose Party. He was started that party. A bull moose is a term that you might call somebody who's very loud and opinionated and has a lot of ideas. Well, that kind of described Teddy Roosevelt to a T. And he had his foreign policy. This is very important that you remember this. Teddy Roosevelt's foreign policy was called the Big Stick Policy. He said, let's use military strength to influence foreign policy over other countries. The Big Stick Policy says, you know what, if you're carrying around a big stick and you look really tough, you don't have to say very much. It's kind of like, say, maybe somebody walks around the neighborhood with a great big pit bull. Okay, that guy doesn't have to say very much. He's not going to have too many people try to attack him or fight him. His pit bull is kind of showing how powerful he is. Well, that's what Teddy Roosevelt is saying with the military and with our Navy. We'll show the world how powerful we are. We won't have to get in many fights when they see how strong we are. They will leave us alone. So he uses this policy frequently, which caused a lot of resentment in Latin America. The Latin Americans said, you don't have any right to be here. You don't own this territory. But Teddy Roosevelt said, well, you know, we're pretty powerful, and it'd be better to be our friend than to be our enemy. Here again is a political cartoon. It's very important to analyze this. If you look here, this word, I'm sorry, I can't exactly read what it words. I believe it says administration, and this is supposed to represent Teddy Roosevelt. This says the new diplomacy, and that's his big stick. It's like a big baseball bat. And you see the Latin Americans, they're saying, you know, go away, we don't want you here. And then here are the imperialists from America, and they're saying, here's more ships, take this. Let's be stronger here. Okay? All right, let's move on to the next slide. Okay, after President Roosevelt, he served out the rest of McKinley's term, and then he was reelected. And then in 1912, Roosevelt's vice president became president. His name was William Howard Taft. Well, when he became president, he said, let's don't have the big stick policy. Let's change that policy to dollar diplomacy. What he said is, instead of threatening these countries that we're going to take over and be strong and scaring them to death, he said, let's take U.S. businesses and let's have them use their money to invest in companies in Latin America and to hire people to provide jobs. When they see how prosperous they can become, they'll become our friend. But he did still say, we will use military to regain our money. If they don't repay those loans, we'll use our military. Well, Taft was only president for 4 years, and then Woodrow Wilson became president. There's a lot of drama about President Taft only serving 4 years, and if you remember when we talked last unit about Roosevelt, even though he had been Taft's best friend, he didn't like the way he was president, and so Roosevelt ran against him, forming the Bull Moose Party, which that they split the vote between the people who would elect them, which helped Woodrow Wilson become elected. Okay, Wilson, his foreign policy was called watchful waiting or moral diplomacy. And that's normally what we call Wilson's policy is moral diplomacy. It's going to be very important. You're going to have a project about this, so you need to remember. Roosevelt's policy was his big stick policy. Taft's policy was dollar diplomacy. Wilson's policy was moral diplomacy. What he said is, let's use moral and legal standards. Let's don't do things to other countries that we wouldn't allow here. He also used this policy in Mexico to help the Democratic government, and we sent troops to hunt for Pancho Villa. All right? Okay, so we were an imperialistic country for about 20 years, and so here are some of the results. Okay, there were mixed reactions by the rest of the world. The U.S. is disliked in Latin America because imperialism backs unpopular governments. Sometimes imperialists said, well, that government's pretty cruel to its people, but they support American companies and they're supporting us, so we're going to, let them stay in power. Sometimes we helped unpopular governments come to power because we thought they would protect American interest. Other countries turned to the U.S. To imperialism to help with economic and military aid. All right, I'm going to try very quickly. There's Haiti, Dominican Republic, Puerto Rico, the Virgin Islands, Panama, Nicaragua, Mexico, Cuba. Okay, we see all of these effects for the activities that we had. Okay, so that is the end of our notes for this unit. There will be some activities that you will be expected to do. If you have any questions, remember that you can call me, you can text me, you can send me an email, and hopefully by the time that you are seeing these notes, I'll have my Zoom class up and running. And if you have questions or need help, you can tap into my Zoom. Don't forget to save these notes in your Google Drive in the Imperialism folder.